So Rolf mentioned people who are grumpy because they had not yet had their cup of coffee. And our next speaker knows all about having her cup of coffee. So we have Sarah Snudden from Keurig, who's going to talk about, nothing is more fundamental for people than having that first cup. She's going to talk about research fundamentals.
All right. And just
the green one. I think the green one's
the green. All right. I'm going to stand up here because I'm small but powerful. So I'm Sarah Snudden, and one of the things I love most about coming to a convention like this is meeting other consumer insights people and finding out how they got into the field. I mean, it's not like there are a lot of kids out there actively debating doctor, firefighter, consumer insights worker. Although I do think we probably should get Lenny and the future thinkers working on that. Our equity could use a little boost. In my own case, my 20s were pretty colorful. I call that the adventure capitalist phase. And I had a lot of adventures. I rode motorcycles, I did a marathon, I even ran off with the rodeo, but at a different time than Olin did from Campbell's Soup. And as I kind of looked for the common thread that tied all of those different adventures together, the thing I realized about myself was that I really liked figuring out why people do what they do. I realized that I was kind of an amateur anthropologist, and I also like to think sociological super sleuth, because it made it seem more spicy. I liked that calling, but it still left the really important question of how do you get a day job that will actually pay the bills? And when I found out there was actually something that I could do in corporate America, I was surprised and delighted. I would become an anthropologist of consumption, the great American pastime. And while my stories of life on the corporate frontier are perhaps less cocktail story worthy than the adventures in my 20s, I did see a lot of colorful terrain. I have lived for the moment in big consumer packaged goods companies where I searched for meaning and how consumers cleaned their toilets or took out their trash. I have cared for 7 generations of tomorrow in a one-person insight shop at a scrappy entrepreneurial little company. And now I've landed at Keurig Green Mountain, which you may know as the purveyor of the K-Cup coffee and the maker of the single-cup coffee brewers that have mushroomed on countertops across America. No matter how you slice it, Keurig Green Mountain has had really, really big growth. Think double digits over a number of years. Think in terms of beverage units that are like 500 million, the next year $1 billion, the next year $2 billion. And for me, this makes the company I'm at now sort of the equivalent of a turn-of-the-century gold rush town, where you've got all kinds of people coming in, and if it's helpful, think of it as Deadwood from the HBO series. I have a lot of corporate coping techniques. I now think of myself as an insight frontiers woman in the wild, wild west of growth. And just like in a gold rush town, you've got people who are coming in from all different backgrounds. They speak all different CPG languages, so if I want to talk about a concept test, I might actually not be talking about the same thing as my brand partner. We've got a lot of process infrastructure that can't keep up with the growth. Imagine it like having 85% of your company that's dropped in the last 3 years. So a lot of growth, a lot of change. And what I'd like to think that the growth is solidly driven by the fact that we meet a really important consumer need of delicious coffee early in the morning before you're even awake at the push of a button. There are a lot of people who don't see it my way. We're very engineering driven, and that isn't always the most fertile ground for consumer driven thinking. That means I have to be incredibly dedicated, incredibly persistent, and incredibly artful about how I weave insights into what we do. Also, thinking about major growth and accomplishing it over a number of years, what that leads to is more and more people wanting more and more growth over time. It makes us a little bit like the child star where Wall Street is just waiting for us to crash and go to rehab. And that also sets up some really interesting pressures to continue to grow. Oh, I forgot my slides. Oh, okay, so that's green button. All right, so there's an image of our Keurig brewer. So that leads me to the place in this story where, as we are pushing out into new growth frontiers that are really important to deliver that continued double-digit growth over time, it means that we have a lot of new platforms that we have to do that with. All right. And as part of the world order that we have, a lot of times we have an innovation incubator space, and then we have the commercialization team that brings it to life. What I'm about to talk about is a project that's a really important new platform for the company. I won't go into any spicy detail about exactly what it is, as is the case, but it's going to be a big one for us, and you've probably read about it to some degree in the news if you follow that kind of thing. So where we come in this story is I've got this project, it's transitioning, and we have lots of really good pieces of work, but I'll emphasize pieces because there's studies here and there's studies there, and we're rushing to the next step always. And one of the things that happens when you have fast growth is that you often have flocks of consultant strategists who are just swooping around your business, and they kind of swoop in for a project and then they're out. I have been the victim of many a hasty stakeholder interview, and I have crossed my fingers a number of times with a lot of different consultants as I've sent off the documents and hoped that they would be uploaded. I often find myself in a situation with consultants where I have to say things like, oh, it might be really helpful to revisit the brand equity book now, or would you like me to resend the foundational qualitative document? So with this context in mind, when I started working with Blue Dog, it was immediately and notably different, and different in a really good way. Not only did they give great stakeholder interview, which I've come to really appreciate, it was immediately clear to me that they read every piece of the information I sent them, and they were thinking about it. They were connecting dots. They synthesized and came back to us with articulations of insights that we'd kind of missed as we hustled to get to the next gate or move things along quickly. So in a world of really amazing tools and processes and really all the great flashy things we're learning about here, I think in the fight to build empathy and kind of seed the consumer in an organization, there's really something to be said for the classics and the old world order of thinking and reading and learning and doing up front, and then having a great tool, which is what we're about to talk about, on how you get to the next piece. So we fed these bits to Blue Dog, and then we leveraged what was called the consumer lens process, which was the how that got us to the consumer muse process on the other side. And those muses allowed me to have really great organizational absorption and intuitively and organically really plant the seeds of the consumer in our organization. And I think that's super important because I think in my world, insights work best when people almost don't realize they're insights, like that it just comes in through such powerful narrative that they can really sort of internalize them and take action. I'm now going to turn it over to Marcy Barson, who will tell you a little more and hopefully work the slides better. Green button.
Green button. Okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm Marcy from Blue Dog, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process that Sarah referenced. So Blue Dog's consumer lenses are grounded in human truths as defined by the works of people like Maslow, Young, Myers, and Briggs, and other well-known established human nature theorists. As such, they are universally applicable and not limited to a particular time, place, market, or category. They uncover the root motivations and values behind certain human behaviors and preferences. They are a tool that can be applied to virtually any existing consumer market data, but they're by no means a replacement for this data. While insightful in and of themselves in isolation, our consumer lenses function best as a filter for this data. This is a quick snapshot of the model. It is the true north of Blue Dog's innovation and design thinking. Blue Dog's consumer lenses allow us to efficiently jumpstart our consumer learning journey and thereby accelerating the process. In and of themselves, the consumer lenses are just skeletons, or we like to say chassis of consumer truth. When we apply the consumer lenses to a specific category or context, we start to put the real meat on the bones. Our consumer lenses come to life, our consumer muses rather come to life through specific orchestrated consumer touch points like learning labs, ethnographies, or mobile research. By bringing our muses of inspiration to life in the form of real consumers, we have a powerful narrative tool. And that is how the magic happens.
So I'm going to walk you through some of the steps we took in our journey. It's always a little bit different every time, but we started out with the first step of dimensionalizing the consumer behavior. And then we really got to know the muses, leveraging mobile ethnography, which we'll talk about a little more. Then we kind of stepped back, identified opportunity areas, and then went into consumer co-creation labs. That was a neat process because it brought in some of those same consumers, so we had some big picture, and now we were really focusing in on the context we wanted to know more about. We then dimensionalized the consumer behavior and the motivational drivers, and identified the Muse passion areas and opportunities for the new platform, and got ready for launch.
So in the consumer lens process, we filter data to create our muses of inspiration. And here is one example of one particular muse. In the early stages of learning, we focus on getting to know them as people, real people. And this helps provide the context for the insights. It helps us understand how to connect their product and category behavior back to their deeper core motivations and values. Muses provide a view into the hearts and minds of real people, and that is what enables true empathy. Through the eyes of each consumer muse type, here you can see an example of four examples of muse types. We were able to understand not only what was exciting to each of them, but also why. Keurig's new platform, it turned out, held even broader appeal than what we initially thought, which was pretty exciting. We were starting to understand how we could maximize the opportunity while still creating truly meaningful and relevant offerings for each muse type. And you'll see how this played out in just a moment. Through our various levels of consumer learning, the muses helped us flesh out the emerging strategy. And while we're looking to see what is unique to each muse type, we're simultaneously looking to uncover common needs and wants, the threads that linked the muses together. In this way, we were able to develop hypotheses around some big opportunity areas. You can also see here how we use our muses to tell our story and frame the team's point of view. This is powerful for many reasons. We know that not only does it help bring the consumers to life and really dimensionalize them in ways that the individual research reports just can't and didn't, but it also helps us to create a compelling multimedia story to support our recommendations. Letting consumers tell their own story is always the most convincing.
By starting with the consumer life level through the mobile ethnography and then going to the learning lab where we were looking at the particular platform opportunities, it really created this great synergy where we actually had a process where the 1 + 1 was more like a 3. It was bigger than the sum of the individual parts. And that was really helpful in sort of bringing the whole process to life and being able to convincingly explain what was driving the choices. It's also notable that working with Blue Dog, they have a very strong internal design department. And while we came with some rich pieces of stimuli, Blue Dog helped us thoughtfully put the stimuli into a more consumer-friendly context than what we would have done on our own. And that helped to bring it to life for consumers in a really compelling way. It's this one.
So in the learning labs, leveraging the stimuli to simulate the consumer experience, we were able to develop our framework. In this case, the Muses inspired 3 key ways in to Keurig's new platform, which ultimately told us what to build and create. Through the Muses, the goal is to enable the team to know their consumers so well and at such a deep level that they can actually anticipate and internalize what their consumers want. Their role is to inspire marketers, product developers, designers, the organization as a whole to be creative, but in a way that will strongly connect with real consumers. The Muses are the inspiration behind our strategy.
Another distinguishing point about the process was that we were able to leverage that in-house design talent to bring our data to life in a way that was more compelling than what we typically have. There was a lot that would go behind a chart like this, but ultimately you see we've got sort of a consumer report style dynamic that shows that what we came out with was a portfolio that had ideas, product ideas that specifically delighted each particular muse had something, but also that the ideas work together as a whole. So we had this nice mix of sort of seeing how the pieces would work together and knowing sort of who would be drawn to which ideas. This helped us really bring the product platform to life and move into a launch mode where we knew we had something that was compelling, intuitive consumers, and much bigger than what we initially thought. So I think at this point we can open it up to questions.
Questions? Any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.